Today we are in for a very special treat. But before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone watching to please start a watch party today. This message today will be so inspiring, and we want to get it out to as many people as we can. My team member Casey will be in the comments. She will be sending me your questions. So please don't hesitate to leave comments and questions below. We'd love to hear them. And so finally, I want to introduce my guest. Today, I am joined by Zack Starr. Zack is a veteran advocate, professional actor, and mental health advocate with expert knowledge in recovery from physical, mental, and moral injury. He knows what it takes to help others navigate the transition from tragedy to triumph. Zack's personal story is told in the feature documentary film, The Epic Mile, which chronicles his 2,650-mile hike from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail. You can find the movie at zackstarr.com/movie. So Zack, welcome. I am so happy to have you here.
Hello. I'm happy to be here and happy to have an opportunity to share my story and reach more people. I love the series. I've been watching. I'm a fan too.
All right. Yeah. We'll take all we can get. So real quick, I think we're ready to get into it. Now, I don't know if we're going to need tissues on standby or not.
Oh, we'll try not.
But the series name is called No Guts, No Glory. And man, this hike alone takes major guts. And so tell us, what was the driving force that inspired you to make this trek? Please tell us, share your story with us.
Yes. Well, people might be familiar with the Pacific Crest Trail. Cheryl Strayed in the movie and the book Wild did a third of it. And it kind of blew up from that exposure. But I have to go backwards a little bit in the story. And back to my military service, and this all leads up to my decision on the trail and that defining moment in my life to decide that. But in the military, I had an injury to my shoulder, and it was a simple rotator cuff tear, and they botched the first surgery. So they put in 5 titanium screws. Found out later they dropped one that's still in the nerve center of my arm, the brachial plexus, and it's floating around. And then of the other 4, he put 2 in bone correctly and 2 in soft tissue. So I had 2 surgeries in the military, had a bunch of pain. They gave me a medical discharge. And years later through the VA, telling me it was arthritis, I just kind of toughed it out. Like, well, I guess this is what arthritis feels like, even though it didn't feel like arthritis. And so 10 years later, one day that screw that was floating around decided to stop my day. And I went to the ER, and it had wedged itself in the ball and socket of my shoulder. So imagine if you just put a bolt in a thing of oil in your car, you just opened it up and dropped a bolt in there, and what damage that would do. It destroyed the inside of the shoulder, and I needed immediate surgery. And it's actually, I can tell this part of the story later, but I wear it here on my dog tag, and I'll tell you that reason a little bit later. But so they removed the screw, but I needed immediate surgery. So I had to pay out of pocket. The VA was red tape. And that triggered a really bad season of looking for outside doctors. I had another surgery 2 years later. And in the meantime, the VA had put me on 15 pills a day. So crazy over medication, which came with side effects. And their MO at that time was like, take this pill and then that causes side effects. And here, take this other one. And so this was a huge battle. And I was out over $40,000 in medical care for something service related. And so that ended up defining my 20s and the majority of my 30s up to that point. 10 years later, I faced another surgery, and I had continued to have pain. And it was December of 2014. And I had tried to get back to what I used to do. So I no longer could use my shoulder. And I tried doing other things. I played one-arm golf, which is really hard to do, and I'm really bad at it. But I always tell people you lose lose less golf balls when you can't really hit it far. So that was the bonus part. But I just tried anything I could to stay active, because that was a huge part of who I was and who, identified myself as, somebody being active. And so I tried to get back to the things that I loved, because that had defined me for so long. In 2007, I ended up going through 2 years of depression during all of that and was suicidal. And so that stuck with me for a long time. And so the hike came from me wanting to do this 220-mile hike in the Sierra Nevadas called the John Muir Trail. And I went into the VA appointment. I said, Doc, I need to get better. Let's do this surgery so that I can get out there and hike. And he looked at me and he just said, you need to quit backpacking because it's going to make it worse. And Patty, it was at that point that I realized I had stopped everything. I had stopped all the physical activity I had done. I eat left-handed, I use the mouse left-handed. I mean, there's everything that I do left-handed. I can't do right-handed, not even sleeping on that side. And so I had stopped all of the things that I loved to the point where somebody was telling me you should not walk with something on your back. And to me, that was crazy. So it was at that moment, and just to jump into that part, where to me, it was a defining moment. I'm either going this way and I'm going to continue to let this injury define who I am and what I'm capable of doing and define my future, because it had steered the course of my work, my employment, where I lived. Dealing with chronic pain has a lot of impacts. Or I'm going to take control back and I'm going to go the other way and say, no, I'm taking control of my life and I'm not going to let this define who I am. And I remember leaving that office that day and I just said, you know what, he's right. I don't need to hike the John Muir Trail, this 220-mile trail. I need something bigger. And so in my research, I'd found the PCT hikers. And to me, it just blew my mind. They were crazy. Nobody goes out for 5 months and does 20-mile average a day for 5 months, sleeping on the ground in a tent, and not showering. It's just not something normal people want to do or can do. And it has a huge dropout rate because of that. Because it's really difficult. It's difficult physically, but it's also grueling mentally. And so to do it start to finish. And so I said, you know what, this is my moment to take this back. So I had surgery number 4 in December of 2014. And in April 2015, I hit the trail. And so that's the story you referenced, the movie. I videoed everything while I was on the trail. Unfortunately, Facebook Live wasn't a thing back then. I couldn't get Wi-Fi access in these tiny towns. And so I had all this footage and nothing. I was videoing every day to update my family and nobody saw it. And a good friend of mine, Step Rowe, said, we need to share your story of what you've been through to help others. And so she convinced me to share that. And we turned it into the film, The Epic Mile. And it walks us through the hike and how that has paralleled my injury and overcoming adversity, because nature can teach us a lot of things. So it was very eye-opening for me to see the lessons I'd learned on trail were things that I had learned through going through chronic pain, and I just learned how to apply them a different way. And then since then, I've had 3 more. I finally got the joint replacement I needed, and it's been more years of chronic pain. So I have an appointment tomorrow morning for the start of possibly surgery number 9. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the overview. If you want to dive into any of those pieces, because there's so much to extract out of that entire thing and what I learned that I am now able to help other people learn through my public speaking platform.
So there's one part that kind of really resonated me and keeps coming up in these series as we just talk about, just take one step forward, just one tiny step forward, whatever it is, just inch forward. You're going in the right direction. You're making progress, even if it's, a little bit at a time. And there was this scene where you're on a dirt road and you said something along the lines of, it's not about, hiking the next 2,600 miles. And you looked exhausted, by the way, when you were saying this. I don't even recall how far you were.
It was 109 degrees in the Mojave Desert. I remember this very, very vividly.
But you said it's about hiking from here to there, and you just pan the camera down a dirt road. Everything looked the same, but it was just taking that next step. And so do you recall, what did you tell yourself just to keep moving forward? It's 109, you're exhausted. I'm sure your feet hurt, your shoulder hurts. I mean, everything hurts, you're drained.
Yes.
How did you just keep moving forward?
That was the hardest part, because going into this, I was not physically ready to hike that amount. I was in the worst shape of my life. And I guess this is the part I left out. I had worked at my family business for the year prior. I'd moved from Austin back to Ohio to help my father with his store. And so it was such a departure to go on this epic journey from where I was at life in that moment. And so I wasn't really prepared to go on this epic journey. What made that worse is the pain in my shoulder. You know, we tell that story throughout the movie, but it got worse, and I'd had a shot right before I left for the trail to make it a little better. And that was the final one they could give me. It starts deteriorating your joints and things after a while, after you have too many of those. And I thought I was going to get another one. And halfway on the trail, I got the information from the doctor that I couldn't get another shot. When you have chronic pain, so this is to answer your question, it's hard to go through that grueling task day after day. And that's what I say. It's a mental challenge on the trail. When you add chronic pain on top of that, and it was sharp in my shoulder, I wasn't sleeping at night. I wasn't rejuvenating my body. And then just the constant pain, it came down to the point of breaking it down to the smallest increment I could manage at that time. And we actually have footage in the movie where I was videoing where I almost thought I was going to quit. And the only thing I could do that day was look off in the distance and pick a tree and get from where I was to that tree and then do it again. Pick a stream or a bend in the road. And so that's what I was saying in that clip is it has nothing to do with going from Mexico to Canada, because you just can't fathom that. You wake up the next morning, you feel like you got hit by a truck. You don't want to hike. And you're like, Canada, that's 4 months away. I can't make that, you know? So you have to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And during that time of pain flaring up on the trail, it wasn't small pieces. It was baby steps. It was from here to that tree, get there. All right, now I need to go from here to the stream, get there. And that was the only way I could get through. But that resonates with challenges we face in life, right? I mean, everybody going through COVID-19 and all of the things that we're dealing with in 2020, sometimes we have to step back from a situation we're in and say, what is the one thing I can do right now that I know I can accomplish, and do that small step and then do the next small step. You know, in my speaking career, I talk to veterans a lot. We do a lot of work with veterans in the transition home, depression, suicide prevention. If you're going through depression, it is not about even having lunch with a friend. You can't think that far ahead. You say, I have to get out of bed. All right, I got out of bed. What's the next goal? I need to get in the shower. Because if you put all 10 steps of, I need to get out of bed, get in a shower, I need to choose what clothes to wear, I need to open the door, I need to talk myself into the car and then go into public. When you're going through depression, you don't want to do any of that. And so it shuts down. You shut it down and you just do nothing. And so sometimes breaking that down to the smallest increment you can manage at that moment allows you to keep moving forward, which is the biggest key.
Wow, I've never really heard it explained that way. Yeah, just accomplish getting out of bed or getting in the shower, putting on clothes. Wow, that's really eye-opening, and I think some really good advice for our viewers. So yeah, and I love the analogy that you gave to COVID, because it feels like, you said like Canada's 4 months away. I mean, I remember doing a hike and I was like, how many more miles do we have to go? And I think it's like a 5-mile hike, right? Like totally wimpy. It was all uphill, if that makes a difference.
Right.
Not the same, but anyways. But I mean, to hear like Canada's 4 months away, and with COVID, it feels like, I don't know if there's ever going to be an end. I mean, it's
right.
true.
Yeah.
It feels like that we're getting back into fall and then winter, and it's cold and flu season, and there's a lot of political unrest that's happening at the same time, and it's an election year, and oh my gosh, there's so many things going on, and it's really distracting, and it really can, I know even for me, I had to get to the point where I just couldn't even watch the news anymore, because it was so disturbing. It's hard to process after a while.
It weighs on you so much sometimes when you look at all the options and all you try to get over those hurdles. Before we got on this call, we talked about pivoting and how we can pivot our businesses quickly. That isn't looking at the end goal. It's, you make that pivot and you say, what can we do next? What's that next step that we have control over, that we can accomplish? And that allows us to change direction or to, like I said, keep going forward. So same thing with COVID. If we try to look too far down the trail, we get into analysis paralysis to where we don't do anything because, we can't see beyond all of the obstacles. And I have to admit, we're on this no guts, no glory. And I'm sharing this story of when I had the guts to get out of the corporate world and to do this hike, which has now led to my public speaking and all the help I'm doing with veterans. And all of that stemmed from that decision. However, even knowing that, I'm just as guilty. And ironically, the first paid speaking event I had when I got back, I froze on stage twice. I ended up paying the venue back, the organizer. I didn't want the money. I felt guilty and I quit speaking. Now, I had done a year of free speaking engagements, had impact, had great feedback, and I just stopped for 6 months and did not do another engagement. I had another booking that I had to honor the commitment, and that's what forced me out of that slump. But again, so knowing this is one thing, and how we apply it, I have to continue to remind myself even to apply it. Even though I've had this epic thing that I did, it's still good to remember that it just takes those little movements that we can do to keep us going forward.
Well, I will admit, starting the No Guts, No Glory series was a bit nerve-wracking for me. It's definitely out of my comfort zone for sure. And my boss, Amber Vilhauer, I mean, she's just so good at like, you can do this.
Amazing.
You do it
She's
all the
amazing.
time. You've done it before. You can host your own series. I mean, just do it. Just try it. And I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Uh-huh.
Let's try it. Let's start it. Let's just see what happens, and why not? And I think a lot of it too is just kind of like you said, it's getting out of your own head. And I thought, let me just get past the first one, and I'll get past the next one, and then the next one, and it's getting easier. I'm making mistakes along the way, but I'm figuring it out at the same time and having fun while doing it too. So,
And I think that's the beauty of it. If you keep it real, a few years ago, everybody wanted this polish on everything. And now what we're seeing with business is people want real. They want the authentic version of what you're doing. And so allowing people to see that, which is great about these live events, is people just get to see it for real. And if we mess up, we mess up. Right before we got on here, the big trash truck was down on my street making a ton of noise. We talked about that, but that's the beauty of these live things. And I have to say, just about every podcast I've ever listened to, when they get to episode 100, they all say, wow, when I started this, I never saw it getting to 100 episodes. Right. And it's the same thing. You just do that next one, and eventually you'll be sharing with me your 50th episode of No Guts, No Glory.
well, I can't wait. You'll have to be on that episode.
Absolutely. Would love to.
So I love what we learned today was, let's just accomplish one small task at a time. If it's getting out of bed, even if that's what it is, if it's getting in the shower, just do one little thing at a time. I love that. And I'm going to remember that the next time I'm struggling, having a hard time, if it's even just jumping out of bed or tackling that next task.
Yeah. Just
So I did want to ask, so any words of advice to our viewers who are thinking about hiking the PCT? Because I'm sure a lot of people have thought about it, contemplated, should I do it? I don't know. What do you
yes.
say when someone asks, should I do it?
I say, imagine the worst scenario you can, and then multiply that by 100. Because in all the videos, what you don't get to see, there's no way to let the audience know what starvation feels like. For 5 months, I lost 40 pounds eating over 4,000 calories a day. My
Wow.
body was eating itself. I was starving the entire time. So what it feels like to starve. Now I don't want to go without a meal ever. To feel like, being run over by a truck literally, or to have your joints hurt. There were times where my feet were so bad. I have flat feet, which is horrible. I was going less than a mile an hour, which made it daunting, so the smell of not showering in Oregon, I didn't shower for 22 days. Just imagine the worst case scenario, your 5 mile hike uphill, and just multiply it by 100, and then say, if that's enjoyable for 5 months, then go do it. Yeah. It was beautiful though. I mean, you don't remember the pain, you remember the joy. So I'd say the one thing to answer your question honestly is have a why. If you start with your why, Simon Sinek says that the best.
Yeah.
Your why will push you beyond your own perceived limits. Mine on the trail shifted. I was there for personal reasons, to get over the suicide part of my life and the depression, and feel like I could take control back. And halfway through, when I almost quit, it shifted, and I started focusing on others. I started focusing on the veterans I could help when I get done, and the message it would help. So mine shifted a little bit, but that drove me through the second half of the trail. So I would say, with whatever you're doing, whether you want to hike the trail, start a new business, pivot with your business, have a good why and keep that at the core of what you do every day. And it helps you get over those hurdles and be successful.
So can you tell us a little more about some of the work that you're doing with veterans, and if maybe there are any veterans that are tuning in, do you work with them directly or do any sort of direct coaching with them, or how can they benefit from some of your services?
The first thing I'll say is if anybody's watching and they need assistance, definitely reach out. There are certain things you learn through the process that you want to share with others. So my channels so far have been through doing video production and putting out things like the Epic Mile and speaking to groups, speaking to Blue Star Mothers and other groups. I've been a part of Ohio State. We did a Veterans and Shakespeare event. So multiple things, but it's really letting veterans know what the keys are to transitioning home. So we talk about the suicide rate, and I was almost a statistic of that. And I've learned that there are these key pillars that if we pay attention to and we cover those, it can ease that transition home. Because the worst part of the military is you go in, you get trained in a whole new language, and when you come out, there's no training. They just send you out in the world and say, but you've lost your structure. You've lost your chain of command. You've lost your purpose. Now you have to find a new why. And your comfort zone, your community, all of these things have been stripped away. And now you're on your own, which is why we see the suicide rate. It's not in the first few years you get back, it's later. So it's when veterans start, finding out what's not working for them. So we do it in a lot of different ways. We're about to launch another YouTube channel about adventure lifestyle. I'm about to take a new trip. And that's simply showing veterans or anybody with an injury, or I don't like the word disability, but an injury or any kind of setback, that you don't have to let that define who you are and what you do. So we're about to start that series just to show people you can challenge yourself in different ways and find a new purpose. But if anybody wants to reach out, info@zackstarr.com, and that's to come and speak or to talk one-on-one. I'm an open book. So I'd love to help.
So there's a little something I wanted to tell the audience, and it's something special that you did for me. And so Zack and I, we met at Author Up Live a year ago, and Author Up Live is a conference for aspiring authors, and we teach you how to launch your next book. So we met a year ago in Rockledge, Pennsylvania, and I was doing the event planning for the event. I was the event manager, and I've done event management a ton of times before, and I've always felt, gratitude and appreciation from those that I have worked for. But you did something really special that no one had ever done for me, and I still remember it, and it still stuck with me. And it was a simple handwritten thank you note. It was the last day, we were all saying goodbye, and you handed Amber and I a handwritten thank you note. We each had our own note with our own message, and it was so special. It knocked me off my feet because no one had ever done that for me before. And it sounds silly because it's like, oh, it's such a simple gesture, but it was just, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was like no one had ever said thank you in that way before. And I just think that if for people out there watching, if you're looking for a special way to thank someone, a handwritten note goes such a long way, because I still remember that note and it still touches me. So thank you for that.
I appreciate knowing that. Yeah, it's sometimes it's those small things that we can do to help others. And I learned that on the trail, just another lesson. They have trail angels, people who help for no reason. They help hikers, whether it's through hitchhikes or through leaving a cooler of donuts and cold Coke, or Pepsi on the side of a trail. They do amazing things and they get nothing out of it. It's for no purpose. And so, yeah, now my nieces and nephew put me to shame because they write handwritten notes all the time for everything. And it reminds me, oh, I better stay on top of my game. So, but I'm glad it meant something to you. You guys did amazing work. And if anybody is even thinking about writing a book, you have to go to Author Up Live. I don't know if you guys are doing it again next year, but it is phenomenal.
Yeah. So the one that took place in March was supposed to be another in-person event, and it was just before the country shut down, and we had to make the decision of Are we going to keep going? We really weren't sure at that time. We ended up doing it virtual, and then we haven't planned anything since. We still want to keep it going. It's just, figuring out, well, how are we going to make it work?
Right.
If we just
With
do another
everything
virtual
going
event
on.
again. Yeah,
I'm sure Amber will figure out a way, as she always does.
she does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, gosh, Zach, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Man, trail angels. Anyone
Trail
living
angels.
close to the trails, I mean, dude, let's go out and like leave some goodies. I love that idea. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to Google that.
Yeah. Google Trail Angels. It's amazing what a can of Coke can do when you're out there starving and you just come across a trail with a cooler and a note that says, enjoy PCT hikers. And you're just like, it's crazy.
Oh
So,
man.
yeah, everybody go out and be a trail angel to somebody for something this week.
Oh, I love that. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And hey, if you do it, if you write a note, if you do something special, post it on the No Guts, No Glory Facebook page. Let's do it. I'm going to
Let's
think about
hashtag trail angels.
it. Yes.
Life trail angels. Well, thank you so much for having me. I sincerely appreciate it. And I love everything that you guys are doing as a company and an organization. No Guts, No Glory. Amber's changed my life in her messaging and everything she's helped me with. And I know there are lots of us out there. So let's keep spreading the love.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And